Hi there, my name's Adam Fielding, and today I'm going to be showing you exactly how I put together one of the patches from my Europa Relay refill. Europa Relay is a sound bank for Reason 10's Europa shape-shifting synthesizer, containing 150 patches across a variety of styles, though with a heavy leaning towards the cinematic side of things. So the patch I'm going to be looking at today is called Windwave, which is available in the free demo refill, which you can download from the Fielding SoundWorks site at fieldingsoundworks.com. Windwave is a nice, big, atmospheric ambient soundscape type patch, perfect for conjuring up images of big sweeping landscapes or working as a pleasant atmospheric bed, and it sounds a little something like this. Windwave sound is made of 3 of Europa's engines. What I tended to do was break each ambient patch up into distinct layers that I could then mix together to form a complete soundscape. The key to these ambient patches is lots of slow-moving modulation and lots of processing with the 2 engine modifiers and spectral filter sections on each engine. So let's have a listen to each engine in isolation. So you've got this nice kind of glassy texture to start with, which fills the mids to upper mids quite nicely. So to complement this, we'd ideally want something to fill out the top and bottom of the mix. So let's see engine 2. Engine 2 fills out the top with a breathy sound which bypasses the main filter, so while engines 1 and 3 are rolled off by the low-pass filter, Engine 2 utilises its own high-pass filter to fill out the top nicely. Now we just need the lows. Let's look at Engine 3. And, surprise surprise, Engine 3 fills out the lows to low mids. This is a somewhat less dynamic layer. It's a low drone, so with everything else going on, it's not like we need a crazy amount of movement here. So, we bring all of those together again, and we have a nice satisfying ambient patch that fills out the audio spectrum rather nicely. Now, I've mostly been playing single notes here with the occasional chord, but there's nothing stopping you from playing chords, and, of course, in a mix you might want to roll off the highs or lows accordingly, but this provides a nice sculpted sound to use as a solid foundation. I've used Europa's onboard effects here to tame the lows a little, and add a bit of reverb and delay. But one thing I always try to do with my patches is make them mix-friendly by making them still sound impressive without the effects. So if we disable the effects, it still sounds suitably nice, and it means that you can help the patch sit better in your own mixes by using aux send effects and the like. So let's have a look at each engine and how it produces the sound. We're going to work slightly backwards here and start with the unison section. As we can see, Engine 1 makes heavy use of both harmonics modifiers and the unison detuning to produce a shifting 5th chord. If we change the unison mode back to normal, and back to 5th again, we can hear how that obviously affects the layer. We can also turn the effects section back on. The section that has the biggest impact on this engine, though, is the harmonics section. If we turn it off, and back on again, we can hear that the timbre totally changes. We can hear that the harmonic section produces this interesting glassy sound. The harmonic section modulates the partials of the signal, which can drastically alter the timbre of the sound. In this instance, the random gain modifies the gain for each of the partials randomly. The pos knob changes the pattern used, and the amount knob adjusts the gain levels. What this basically means, in this instance, is that you end up with a more glassy texture, and other harmonics processors can adjust the timbre drastically in other interesting ways. Looking at the modifier section, I've used two harmonics modifiers here, both of which are modulated by a slow-moving envelope and LFO respectively. This is used to produce a slowly shifting sound. Disabling these gives the sound more of a deeper, static feel, though with modulation applied to the shape of the oscillator and filter, we still get a bit of motion already. Here's how that sounds. And again, with the modifiers enabled. Again, I've used a fifth harmonic modulator here to produce a chord from a single engine. Now, looking at the oscillator, I figured for this engine I'd need to start with something harmonically rich to work with, but not too overpowering, which the robot ramp wave seems to suit perfectly. So if we disable all of the other elements, you can hear it's both much deeper than before, but also you can hear it somewhere between a quantized inverse sawtooth and a sort of sample and hold type waveform which, as it turns out, is perfect for this use. The shape knob is modulated here to give a slight sense of movement, even before it hits the modifiers and harmonic sections. We also have a slow-moving LFO modulating the pitch of all three engines to give a slight drifting sound, giving it more of an organic edge. This is produced using the modulation matrix at the bottom of the synth. This engine is sent through the filter, which is set to the MFB filter type with a bit of drive and a higher resonance. I love how musical some of the filters in Europa sound, with the MFB 24 dB low-pass filter being particularly great for gritty, squelchy sounds. I've applied a bit of drive here to give it some slight grit and to bring the levels up slightly, with the frequency controlled by envelope 2 to very gently open and close the filter. So, that's one single engine. So, having a look at engine 2. Engine 2 follows many of the same principles, with a more chaotic oscillator in the form of transformer, which works nicely for a noisier top-end sound. So let's remind ourselves of what the whole thing sounds like. Again, we can see that we've used the random gain in the harmonic section to alter the timbre of the sound, though this time we've also used the spectral filter to apply a high-pass filter to roll off the lows, which makes it that little bit more mix-friendly with the other layers. Again, I've used a shifting harmonics modifier to give that lovely sense of motion, but I've also used a 3-octave unison modifier to spread the sound across several octaves to give it more of a detuned sound without altering the stereo effect provided by the unison section too much. So if we listen to it with that turned on and off, so this engine isn't particularly overpowering and is much quieter than engines 1 and 3 in comparison, though this supplements the two quite nicely. And now, we come to the third and final engine, and probably the most straightforward of the three. I've used an octave down unison with a high voice count to give this nice and deep yet wide sound without additional processing required, and this time I've used the ensemble type in the harmonic section to give it an ever so slightly more watery sound for want of a better descriptor. Although this engine is being passed through the filter section, I've also used the spectral filter to roll off some of the highs, and to also add an extra element of modulation in this particular engine. So this is what it sounds like. This time, there is less movement, and I haven't used any of the modifiers. The modulation on the shape of the waveform is very slight, modulating ever so slightly from a saw to a triangle wave. I believe it's these small touches that all come together to give the complete sound more of an organic feel. So, bringing it all together again, let's remind ourselves of what the complete patch sounds like. As I mentioned before, I've used several slowly moving envelopes and LFOs to modulate various elements of the patch. With LFO 2 being used to control the panning of the first two engines, and LFO 3 being used to modulate some slight pitch drift being noticeable examples. These are controlled using the modulation matrix at the bottom of the synth. The mod wheel is assigned to the filter frequency and engine 2's unison D tune. Unison 2 ignores the filter, so cranking up the mod wheel results in the lows getting carved out and the highs becoming ever so slightly more chaotic, which could be useful for adding tension or just for fading in the sound. So let's have a quick listen to that. So now we've got the sound. We apply a light phaser effect to give the patch a little more width and movement, some slight EQ to roll off the lows, and a bit of reverb and delay to give it a sense of space. And there we have it, a recipe for one of the many ambient patches found in Europa Relay, and one of the 150 patches contained within. I hope you've enjoyed watching this video, and I look forward to sharing more detailed patch breakdowns with you in the future. Cheers!